I worry about these kinds of messages. It's looking like today's message is one that will assure someone specifically. Those I'm speaking to today may feel what looks like very tired of hoping. That's really been a theme I've felt this holiday season very strongly, and it's kind of lingering now into this new year, is what it seems like. It's like a collective desire to just hear the truth, even though the truth sucks and it hurts, which I think is only being furthered by the new year energy to reveal or take off masks, like I mentioned in my last reading. The collective is really leaning into that, into this year of revealing energy for sure. There's what seems to be close-mindedness to this hope here that I kind of want to highlight, like as if you might be closed off to the idea of it entirely, or you might be viewing hope much differently than you have been in the past. And usually what's really funny about this is I warn the opposite, like hopium or content that's over hopifying something. That's usually the norm, but it's clear whoever this is for today, they don't have that problem. In fact, it feels opposite, or it's felt opposite lately. There's definitely what looks like a lot of hesitancy around hope, and that is currently surrounding your energy and coming off very strong here. What's so ironic about this message is the upcoming energy for you is actually very hopeful. And I think that that's ironic because you have this aversion to hope, yet have hopeful circumstances arriving in your energy regardless of your aversion. So Spirit seems very clear here with this is a message for someone who has come very far in some way. I think that this is going to be demonstrated, this how far you've come energy, in something you cannot return back to. It's kind of confirming to you how far you've really grown and how far you've really come, because you have this aversion to hope and this aversion to also returning to something that you've outgrown. It's interesting too, because you might have intense urges to go backwards into those things, but you don't listen to them anymore like you maybe have in the past. It really looks like this aversion, maybe not for hope, but this aversion for going backwards is coming from your higher self. It just doesn't have the same pull to move you like it used to. And that is authority directly from your higher self. And so you can kind of observe those urges and not act upon them. And I sense that is much different than in the past when you were ruled by those urges, when they came over you and you acted. It's almost like you had way less impulse control than you physically do now, which is a gift from your higher self, I see, to align you to your path more fully. So this message today, very interesting so far. I see this kind of being what looks like a confirmation to most, because your guide, spirit, and source are kind of like ensuring discouragement doesn't go too far. I think this hope aversion you have, this space you're in, there's a reason for it, there's a purpose for it, but there's a nudge here to not go too far into aversion for hope. Like, you're allowed to feel it, you're allowed to feel discouraged, but not necessarily believe it all the way. And I think this message is going to explain why. So if that resonated for you, this is your message. You're just getting into it, and I'm feeling thrown off by a detail that is presenting itself. This is definitely not going to be for everyone, but it also might filter a little bit more. The detail coming through here is specific to family, which I find very interesting. You might feel your family holds a lot of responsibility for the struggles you went through. In other words, you could probably directly draw lines from where you've had issues and where they have set you up for those same issues in some direct way. And if it's not that, this is saying there's a direct connection between where you struggle and your family at this time in some way. So that could be like directly struggling with your family. But familial struggle patterns in this lineage here are super strong in this energy today. And I do think I'm going to keep talking about family because it just keeps coming up. So you could have been born into a specific family dynamic in a purposeful way. And that's why it's so strong here. Some of you were born into what looks like an outcast role where you purposefully were placed into a dynamic or a family system that you absolutely couldn't deeply resonate with for a reason. And you absolutely shouldn't have for that matter, but it was purposeful. You were placed in that situation is the point here. And it could be here too that understanding didn't happen for many years. Like the development in your soul and evolution here is like you weren't understanding that you weren't resonating with them. You weren't deeply connecting with them. And it took a lot of time to get that clarity that it was happening at all. In other words, you might have tried to force belonging or resonating with your family system, but recently have what looks like decided to stop forcing that. The decision to stop forcing is what's coming through here. And I think it's going to be the core of this message. This could also really show up in simply not having a family. Something happened that forced the feeling of living outside of a system in some way, but overall, it's clear here that this energy was not random. There's also a group here that could have been what looks like born into a less challenging family dynamic where maybe they didn't feel outcasted or too different, but they also never felt like they could experience full joy due to what looks like restrictions or responsibilities for the system itself. Like you were a main caretaker or you held responsibility much earlier than most, but there's something here getting in the way of a free feeling. You were kind of like entrapped by this system at a very early age. You also could have been involved in other families outside of your own purposefully that were placed there by your higher self to widen that dissatisfaction gap, which I know sounds interesting, but hear me out. It's almost like your higher self here gave external friends or situations to show you what your family lacked on purpose. It was to move you away from them. Those other families for you, just to kind of give one more detail here, is like they basically showed you what was missing. They showed you pleasure or peace in your family that you didn't get to experience. That experience of seeing that and then widening that gap was very important for your path. And it was to create like a seed of separation for you in an important way. Both groups here are pointing at a purposeful lesson with family dynamics or lineage. So they might be tightly connected here, regardless of which specifics you might resonate more with in your experience. The soul lesson and the evolution path here is similar for this message. So here's what this is saying. You in some way were meant to have this familial discomfort to be able to see something important. You are remembering that your soul does not sit comfortably in where it's placed for some reason, and your environment has been constructed to push that remembering. It's not random. It didn't happen to you. It's not working against you. Nothing is random here. That friction is there for a very specific reason, and this whole message is revolving around that reason. So you might be asking at this point, I can already feel some responses in the energy here. You might be asking, why? Salt, why can't I just have a normal family and feel like I fit in and have it be easy and have it be like how it is for others in these other families I see? And the reason is because you have to go through this separation process. From what I see in this arc here is these ties need to be cut and severed in order to call in where your soul energy actually fits. And since that energy is so small and so rare and not common in mainstream energy, as it needs to have what I can only describe as a stronger catalyst. It needs an energy nudge that screams because it has to call out to that smaller group, that smaller soul family connection only when you're ready, and they have to hear it. So it needs what I can only describe as more energetic friction. It needs this feeling of being an outcast. It needs all these heavy emotions because in order to find and signal to this small group of soul family connections and soulmates, in order for them to hear that energy, it needs to be energetically dense. It can only happen through friction. It can only happen through crossing a large emotional experience of some kind, and neutral or harmonious crossings are not potent enough to reach these smaller circles more clearly. In past lives, what I kind of see here is you not being able to complete the contract because this energy is dense. It's hard. It's not easy. And in this life, the pressure is much more unbearable. I can sense that. And that's because you've been building up through so many lives where you couldn't integrate the individualization lesson fully. So your soul feels more ready to shed than it has been in previous lives because that energy builds with each new life. And the exact pressure becomes unignorable at a certain point in a soul's progression. And I see here you're kind of at that final stage. And that's kind of why it feels so unbearable. That's kind of why it's so difficult to tolerate these family systems and why family is coming up here so strongly. I think the next part is going to talk about this individualization, this separation and what it means and why it's so important. But this first part is just to explain that this is not needless pressure or experiencing hardship or experiencing a difficult family. This is something that aligns you as you work through this. This is doing something. This is productive energy, even though it feels otherwise. It's like the pressure from all of this is kind of creating a diamond, but it's very necessary while you're being pressured, while you're experiencing how unbearable it feels. The diamond would never exist if it didn't have pressure, if it didn't have this stage. And similar for you, you would never experience what's going to come to you without feeling this part first. So really, this first part is to explain to you this isn't needless. This isn't, you were born into a bad system and you just tolerate it. No, it's doing something very productive. And I think the next part is going to explain it better. So if I still have you here, you are part of what looks like a very small group of people who have a very specific emotionally charged familial experience and lineage lines that are, the only right word to describe it is charged for you. They're energetically charged. And not everyone experiences so much pressure in their family dynamic like this, regardless of which specific pressure you're experiencing, like holding too much weight or being an outcast or not being able to be close and belong to them. I'll leave more notes about this all in the description because there's a lot here. It looks different for everyone, but there's just a lot of emotion that's entangled around family and lineage. And it's clear here, I think Spirit wants me to keep saying this, is you aren't doomed to experience loneliness or lack belonging in your familial system forever. You're just in this pressure stage where it's meant to push you into individualization further. And then you'll be able to what looks like call in soul level connections that you've been craving for so many lifetimes now, but have never yet experienced. So this separation from the only thing that keeps you grounded in the world, which is family, has very deep karma with it. These are the deepest soul lessons because going against family or belonging to a system goes against our human nature. We are evolved as beings that need to feel safe with family. And so it's deeply unsettling, this lesson, for most who have to go through this kind of challenge or this kind of evolution. It's asking the soul to kind of rise above our physical survival, our primal body in a way. And so that's why souls fight the lessons for so many lives, is because they feel endangered. Every single thing in every book or source will tell you that we are creatures of belonging. We feel the safest in communities and systems and families. And so going against that, not fitting into it, being born into a system that kind of like doesn't hold you, is the deepest soul lesson. What I see from this integration of individualizing yourself from this survival state is it elevates your soul into a completely different playing field because most of humanity stays in that survival state. And this type of lesson elevates only those who can withstand it, which is rare. It is not for the weak. Connections for you could have felt more painful in their endings and changed fundamental parts about you as a result of their ending and how you navigate through the world, how you view things. And that is almost a very direct sign that those connections came from your higher self to push you on the path to individualizing yourself. This is a very important part of this message, is you were put here to individualize yourself from all types of systems, connections, and belongings to find where you really belong. And that sounds so cliche. I know people like talk about coming back to self to find, but you also come back to self to find connections, at least the people who I'm channeling for today. It's very important for your soul path alignment. A note here to what looks like about full integration of this individualization from family and belonging is it looks like once you fully integrate, individualizing yourself, there's clarity that comes from vocation or professional work. Like that could be what you're experiencing now as your first sign. If this is already underway, like you're kind of like getting ideas of what you want to do. If it's not, it's coming because they're closely intertwined together. Professional work is impacted for you specifically by how individualized you are from others and how aligned you are to that path. When you have more energy clinged onto you, it's more difficult to call in the profession you deserve because it kind of like dilutes your career path slightly. This might be because you take on energetic weight from those around you, but I do think that there's something about aligning to this individualization energy and then finding that career or purpose that you've always felt you wanted, but hasn't come to you yet. On that note, there's also a really strong note here about emotional work being very important to your path. Some of you have been what looks like fighting this knowing that you have, like you want work that feels like something that feels emotionally charged, but there's also like you want to pay bills. And so there's conflict there. Deeper clarity that's still underway is coming because you can absolutely have both together. That path will be revealed to you over time as this individualization process deepens. The part that really stands out here is what comes to you after you fully, I guess I keep saying individualize yourself, but yes, individualize yourself from your familial systems in some way. And I think I have to explain what that really looks like. It's unclear for everyone. It looks different, but ultimately I think it's pointing at not forcing belonging in a family anymore. In the past or even now, you may have accepted scraps of connection where, let's say, for example, a family member ignores you for the holidays or something that deeply matters to you, but then they'll perform family type things in other ways that just don't feel fulfilling to your soul. It's like they're pretending to do what a family does on the outside to not feel guilt, but there's like a very deep empty feeling on the inside from you as a response to tolerate that. I see this being where you had to kind of like shut off those desires for a deeper family connection in some way and accept those scraps of love. So individualizing yourself is not forcing connection anymore. It's recognizing it feels unfulfilling and not like a true connection that you really desire, and letting go of that performance of connection, even with family, the most critical safety net we can have as human beings, and doing what's expected, pretending everything's fine, and performing what a quote unquote a family does just to get it over with and fit in and belong. That is not individualizing yourself. That is the opposite. So I think you get the point. It's basically acknowledging yourself and how being around these people make you feel more lonely and not closer, but you're kind of doing it because you have to do it and that's what everyone else does. Once you stop doing that and individualize yourself from that space, you call in higher connections that don't make you feel more lonely. Instead of settling, you find your chosen family in a way. And so the hardest part of this is because family is so deeply intertwined with survival and instincts, it's been continuously confusing you because your soul kind of rejects your family or the system, but your survival instincts are scared without that system. And so you're just kind of like floating without belonging or a system. And that kind of either has scared you or has caused hesitation from not performing anymore. Individualization could kind of also be something right now that you're just naturally moving towards. And this is like your confirmation of why it's felt unbearable or terrible to fake or perform with family or family systems. But once it's fully integrated, which might take some time, it means you basically just stop performing completely. You only call in connections, those true soul connections where you are seen and deeply met. And those connections have been waiting for your signal for when you're ready for them. And that takes complete individualization from these fake systems of belonging. And so what I see happening here from this is a love kind of comes in that's unlike others here. Love is very strong in the space of individualizing yourself from your family system. It kind of is like waiting here for this full coherence where you integrate this lesson of not fearing your survival instincts anymore. And your deepest soul's path seems to kind of rise above those instincts to kind of feel it needs to belong to others to feel safe. You basically return home to yourself in some way in your remembering process through this. And once that happens, love kind of comes in hard because you put out this certain signal that's unignorable for them, for this like person who is connected to your soul family. It changes their course and they respond to your signal ultimately because you're the driver of this. And there's a lot of soul ties here, not just a love connection. There's also a community here. These connections run very deep. And even if it feels late for you, like maybe you're in an older age at this time of getting this message, time, that doesn't matter as much as where you are in this integration, in this separation space. This energy of these people, they're simply waiting for you to fully integrate here, to fully separate yourselves from these systems and these survival programmings, because they will drop all things to kind of meet you quickly. It's not slow, it's just waiting for you. And ultimately, these types of connections don't force you to abandon what you deeply want. They give it all to you and more. And so they might feel a little bit exposing to you at first because you're so used to performance love. And so this might feel very intense in some ways, but this is what your soul has been deeply craving for many lifetimes and instead has been tolerating surface level connections. So with these people, this soul family that finds you, once this integration is complete, what's going to happen is it's going to expedite clarity in your professional life. So I mentioned before that all these themes are tied together. Your individualization process is tied to your soul family, which is also tied to your profession, your career, and your purpose energy. I can kind of see some struggles in work or creation in some way, but that's because when you were in this settling in survival and tolerating these familial systems, by doing that, you were telling the universe to kind of send survival work experiences towards you. And that might be changing, but I do unfortunately see that you did tolerate dysfunction. Many of you also have been getting what looks like kind of professional fragmented experiences where they look kind of good on paper, but then in practice, they're misaligned or don't speak to that emotional part of you that really fuels the work or clarity for you. Emotions are very, very deeply tied to your profession and your purpose here. So this individualization path, it's very important for your soul. It's here to clear the noise by starting with that core survival energy and then rippling out into those deep connections it's going to signal to. And then those deep connections, through experiencing them, through experiencing not having to perform, then comes intense clarity about who you are and how to make a living in a way that serves that emotional side of you that's always been necessary. You're going to kind of find how to activate that through work and vocation thereafter, finding these soul connections. So it's a progressive experience that really starts with familial systems. That's at the core of all of this, and it ripples out all the way to work and purpose. And so if you've been feeling a growing intolerance to your family or the system that raised you, this message is a really good confirmation to you in your path of rejecting those systems. You're not needlessly struggling in these situations that raised you. It's actually clearing the noise. It's actually taking away those false senses of belonging for you where you have to perform. Being born into those systems so opposite from you and your core was intentionally done by your higher self to teach you to come back to yourself in a way. And so that teaching process is painful because it's really just fighting your survival instincts. And I think that that's one of the hardest soul lessons of all. So once your soul family hears your signal that you're starting to put out and they begin gravitating towards you, the message today is to keep focusing on strengthening individualization that you're working through currently, because it is through that energy that your soul family kind of finds you. It is through that energy that your signal becomes loud enough for them to hear you, find you, and begin this rippling effect throughout your life that I see you're already on the path for. Hello, welcome to episode 13, I believe. I'll double check and I'll fix it if it's wrong on the screen. 13 is my favorite number though, which I think it's a lot of people's favorite number, probably because it is like everybody likes the outcast number, I guess. So before some of you get weirded out by this section, I want to clarify what it is first. It basically came from a comment I got a while back that was nudging me to use outros as a way to comment back to all of you or casually just talk. So I kind of use this time to ramble about energy nudges I get frequently. And if you all hated it tomorrow, I would stop. But so far that hasn't happened. And we are 13 episodes deep, baby. So if you're curious about anything like how my readings happen or questions about energy, all that stuff kind of lives here where I address the most common energetic nudges, questions I get. I basically try not to cherry pick or respond to a few comments here and there. If I get something a lot, I will respond to it here. Basically, I do that so it doesn't really create outliers in the energy when I'm reading. When I respond to majority or common energies, it doesn't engage with something specific and it doesn't take from collective reads or make them more narrow. It kind of keeps energy neutral in a way. So today, let's see. Let me look at my good old list. Here's a good one. I keep getting questions about how I discern what is my energy and what is the collective energy. And I think this came from once I started talking about myself a little bit more, you guys started knowing more facts about me. And so when I started sharing those things, some of you maybe started drawing lines of similarities to the readings because you are very intuitive. And my collective is literally full of system and visionary type thinkers. So, of course, a lot of them are zooming out and thinking about who's giving the message and why. So here's my answer to that, because it's a good question. I think my readings probably do to some extent overlap with the collective. Sometimes there's a hard discernment. Like, for the most part, I know this isn't my energy and it's very clear, but I do feel a lot of who I draw into this channel comes from similar energy as my own. So it will overlap in very specific ways that even I can sense. There's times in readings where I feel deeply personal with what is being given by spirit. So I think the answer is there's definitely overlap. There's no denying that, but there's also very hard distinctions that pull me to do a reading in the first place. Like usually I can pick up contrast energy the easiest. And so I'll know it's not for me, but I won't always know when it is necessarily for me because it's kind of like a softer resonance than how contrast normally feels. But for those of you who are curious, to directly answer you, I get more often than not those contrast distinctions. So instead of that softer, similar resonance that I would get with my own readings, meaning I would feel this isn't for me, and thus I would be called to make a video in the first place. But saying that, there are times where within that distinction, there are little small resonance or little small pieces for me within it. And I think that it's because, from calling in very specific types of people, there's probably a lot here for my soul family. And so we're probably on similar paths in our journeys, and that would make sense. This is maybe relevant, but do you all remember when I talked to you about the laws of reciprocation? I don't remember what video it is, so maybe I'll leave a link or details if you're interested. But basically, it's the principle that if you want more of one thing, by the laws of reciprocations, you have to do the polarity or the opposite of that thing to call it in. And so one good example is to learn. You learn through teaching, which is the opposite, but they are the same in an energetic sense. Like teaching is learning and learning is teaching. Even if they feel like opposites, they're part of the same energy family. So to call in learning, you teach more, and to call in teaching, you learn more. And the same with money. To call in more money, you give more money, even if it feels like it does the opposite. Giving and having are the same energetically, even if they feel different in principle. The principle of reciprocation is polarity. And the reason I bring this up is I feel that's what happens for me here is it's not just I'm helping or teaching through spirit, I'm actually learning. And so one of the best ways to learn is through teaching. And I feel I wasn't as aware of things until I felt all your energy and began communicating it in the space. So every day I'm kind of learning. And I think all of your messages will always have a lesson for me in the reading because I'm learning through what spirit is teaching you all or explaining to you all. I don't know if that makes sense, but it feels relevant here in what you guys are asking me is the energy still comes through me and I will always have some form of that message for me, partly due to calling in that soul resonance with you all. Like we're part of that same family, even without ever meeting in the physical. But there's also a part of every message I learn from and I take away from something. So I think the laws of reciprocation are really like important here. They're kind of going hand in hand with the question you guys are asking. So if I say something that helps you, it's probably helping me too in some way. And I don't know if that directly answers the question, but I do think that it's relevant in what you guys keep asking me. And so just on a very practical level, yes, I can sense when something in my readings is for me and when it is for the collective. It's pretty clear when I have collective messages. It's just a completely different experience. It's like contrast than it is when I have something for myself. I will say that sometimes there are subtle resonances that happen in each reading, that there's parts for me. And I think that's because there's deeper ties here between all of us. And so if you're new here, thank you for sticking through Assaults Talks. The reason I go through the links to make Assault Talks is because I really protect the communicational space here. I mean, it kind of would be much easier to just like a comment or reply and move on, but it kind of dilutes or changes my ability to read for collective audiences. And so this is how I demonstrate I still read every single comment and take note of reoccurring comments or energies. And I'm not just like ignoring you guys, but if you're pinging me a lot and it's not getting addressed in Assault Talks, I just want to say, keep pinging. I've only done 13 episodes or whatever the number is now, so it will take time to get through the majority, but I will probably eventually get to your question, and just pinging more often helps me get there. And it also helps me channel more efficiently for you and pick up on your energy in a timely manner. So for the newbies, your comment doesn't have to be personal unless you're totally okay with it. You could just say something like an emoji or something simple. It's really just an energetic nudge, and it doesn't need to be crazy. It's just helping me sort through and channel more efficiently. So I love you guys probably more than you know, or maybe you do know, and in which case, good. Cheers, friends.